Hey, readers, how are you guys tonight? Thank you for joining us. I am so excited to introduce you guys to Roseanna White. I have known about her and read her books for many years. She was telling me that she has written her 25th book, which in and of itself is amazing. She can elaborate more later. She can tell you how many years it's taken her to do that many. Not many. So thank you for joining us tonight. And oh, there's Roseanna. Thank you. I should have asked, do you prefer Roseanna or is there something else?
Roseanna.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I should have asked you earlier and totally forgot. So we were so busy talking about the weather. So
yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the nature of the lady, excuse me. Fascinating little book.
Thank you. So it actually started when The Number of Love came out, interestingly enough. So I had all my author copies sitting on the floor and I was signing a bunch because I do signed copies through my own website. So I'm signing them and I get to the sixth one that's to an Elizabeth. And I was like, man, another Elizabeth. And the phrase just stuck in my head. So as I'm signing, I'm paying attention to how many people had the same names. And I'm thinking, it's really hilarious that we're not confused more than we are, right? With people who have the same names. So I thought a story about a mistaken identity would be fun. And it would be, all about these two Elizabeths and they get mixed up and they're staying in the same flat at different times. So I just kind of let this idea simmer for a while. And I thought it would be a lot of fun if it were set on a cute little island, an English island. So I went hunting up islands and came across the Isles of Scilly, which were just so beautiful, so gorgeous. So I decided, okay, well, we're going to set it here. We're going to run with it. The Scillys are very famous for their pirate history. So we had to put some pirate treasure in there, of course. So the whole idea is that I have my heroine, Libby, who is technically Lady Elizabeth Sinclair, who comes to the islands wanting a holiday, wanting to get away from her brother's schemes because he intends to marry her off to his best friend, who she can't stand. So she comes here hoping just that everything will calm down and she'll just have some peace and quiet. But she stumbles into this mystery left behind by her holiday cottage's former resident, who is also an Elizabeth. Things are delivered to her that belong to the other girl. And then the girl's brother shows up, who is, of course, a handsome clergyman. Perfect hero. So it's a really fun adventure, and we've got the mistaken identity. We've got some themes about science and faith and how the two work together, and just a whole lot of fun. It was, after writing about war for a lot of books in a row, this was just a breath of fresh air. So
I can only imagine, and I have to remember, I was reading one of the Code Breakers, and I forget which one now, but at the time I'm thinking, boy, she's writing a lot of war books right now.
So many war books, yeah. I was ready for a break.
Well, you did a good job. I have to tell your audience, if nothing else, go look them up. I would move there. They are beautiful.
I know, right? So pretty.
Yeah, I'm glad you stumbled on them. So, as one thing, as a reader, thank you for naming your two Elizabeths different names.
Oh,
because
yeah,
otherwise I would have spent the whole book trying to figure out which book which Elizabeth we're talking about.
Right. It took me about 30 seconds to realize, wait, this isn't going to work. I can't have two people going by Elizabeth, especially if I want to, write more about the other one later. So yeah, so we have Libby and Beth as our two Elizabeths.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
It was just for you.
Because I really, because of course you read the back and I'm like, uh-oh. Not a problem at all. Don't let that scare your audience. Just read the book. It's so much fun. And I love the brother, Oliver. And yes, he's clergy, but you made him normal. I thought that was really neat because he was very fallible, and having an arch nemesis, which I thought was hilarious. So
right? I thought that would be hilarious too. Yeah. It's like, what do I need to make Oliver more interesting? He needs to have a rival because that would be hilarious.
Yeah, it was I don't know. There was humor in the whole book, so I so enjoyed that. But well, we're here tonight to talk about history and all that fun stuff. So we should focus. That's not the humor. No humor. We will not have humor tonight. So, but it's COVID. How do you research something in England during COVID when you can't travel?
Well, thank heavens for the internet. I did a whole lot of looking online at images, looking at YouTube videos of people who went and watching those. I have a whole playlist on YouTube of just Isles of Scilly. And I read books, which, you know, is always kind of my standard go-to anyway, but I actually found this really cute little guidebook to the Isles of Scilly written in the 1880s. So it was, you know, 25 years before this, but it's still a pretty good idea of what it was like at the time. And it was, you know, it was a tourist hub even then. So it was just really cool to, you know, read through it. And it's all about how long the carriage ride will take from here to here. And so it was a really fun way to kind of take the tour. And then, of course, my main character is interested in botany and, you know, all these natural things and Latin names, stuff I don't know anything about. So I also had to buy a book that was all about the flora of the Isles of Scilly. It's like this big. Like, I'm just going to flip through and look for random words to put in here. No one.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, and thank you for not using every flower that's on the islands, because
couldn't possibly.
And I will admit this to you, just keep it between us two, is I would skip over the Latin words. So
yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what that says anyways. So
it's not important. All that's important is that Libby cared about them.
Yes, yes, she did. And I have seen this before, so it fascinates me in these historical books that did people do a lot of drawings of the floral and fauna, or was this something unique? Okay.
Yeah, so I actually have another research book I have, which is called like The Nature Diary of an Edwardian Lady or something. I think that's the actual name, but don't quote me on it precisely. But when you look through, it's like she goes through every week and every month and every season, and there's just beautiful illustrations and poems. And, you know, so I mean, Libby was a little more scientific about it than that, but it's really fascinating. If you look at some of the old drawings of naturalists from the 19th centuries and stuff, that they're just they're detailed and they just draw and they write notes, and it's like, oh, that's so cool.
That is, I have to admit, because you know, you see it in other books, so it's just like, and of course I can't draw a stick figure, so
yeah,
maybe we'll stick to not drawing the flora and fauna of West Michigan for you. So we are getting a bunch of questions in here. I think it says, did you set to travel? Did you mean to travel to Scilly? So the islands, I'm not going to try their names. I'm sorry. But anyways, were you going to travel there before COVID?
I was really, really hoping to. We were like, you know, moving our budget this way and that way and planning, okay, if we take these 5 days here. And so it was a not firm plan, but a hope plan. And then it just couldn't happen. So yeah, had restrictions lifted over the summer last year, we would have tried to, but alas, the islands did not want anyone on them who did not live there.
And I can't say I blame them for that.
No, they were going, we don't have it, we don't want it, stay away. So
yeah, and you don't want to be the one that brings it. So, but would you still go? I mean,
oh yeah, I know
you said you're working on book 3, so I didn't know.
I would love to still go. Again, international travel right now still a little iffy, but I would go in a heartbeat, like anytime. It's just so gorgeous. Just sign me up whenever possible.
Yeah, if you go on their tourist site, it's like, oh, and here, book your vacation on the way. I am on the way.
Yep.
So, oh, this is an interesting question. I thought this was really cool. Would it have been unusual for someone, male or female, to have had their own personal microscope? Or was that, you know, was that more unusual or more usual than it is now? Because I personally don't have my own microscope.
I have one sitting right over there. I homeschool, so we've got all sorts of strange things. So microscopes would have been expensive, but they were obtainable. So it wasn't like, you know, you can only find them in the most prestigious universities or anything, because they weren't that new anymore.
Okay.
But it would have been unusual.
Okay. Well, that was a good question. So.
That was a good question.
Yeah.
We'll see. Don't quote me on all that. I'm totally making it up. based on my understanding.
Okay, we'll go with that. We'll just, you know, we'll won't hold your feet to the fire. How's that?
Right.
I heard you say.
No angry emails if I'm wrong. That's what I remember.
I was just going to say, I was going to break you one.
You were going to go fact check me.
I was, because that's what I do. I have to admit that with historical books, every once in a while they do make me, you know, go look something up, like I just said. So how hard is it for you to make sure you get everything correct?
It's actually a constant fear for a historical writer, right? Like I spend so much time researching, and I have so many books, and I do so much reading and so much looking and watching and all this stuff. And then like a year later, I'll just randomly come across this fact, and I'll be like, oh no, I got it wrong, or I missed it, or that should have been in there and wasn't. So, you know, we can never know everything about anything. So we try our hardest, and facts are very important to me. And so I try my best to get everything as accurate as possible. And I have actually one of my first readers for every book is this lovely young lady named Elizabeth from England, who reads them for me so that she can check on, you know, that side of things, the England stuff. So that's a huge blessing. But yeah, it's always a fear that we're going to get stuff wrong. And I do get stuff wrong because human, it happens. I don't know everything about history. But, you know, we try. I try my hardest. And the team at Bethany House is amazing. They're fact checking everything and looking stuff up and being like, I think you have them on the wrong path through the garden. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you.
Oh, they went this way, and now you have them going that way.
Like, according to my map of London. Like, okay.
Oh.
I bow to your map.
So you have a map of London?
They are amazing, the staff at Bethany House. So yeah, so there's a lot of fact checking, but we can never do it all. We always miss something. So when readers, you know, contact me and say, hey, I'm always like, oh, thank you. Great. I'll make sure that's right in the future. But nothing I can do about it now. It's in print. Sorry.
Yeah. And I have to admit, there are times that, okay, I have never written an author with, well, you know, this was wrong, right? You know, I've never done that. But there have been times I read something and go, so, you know, most of the time, most of us just let it go. So don't worry about it too much. So, but I love to hear that you do find that, though, because I was going to ask you that. You know, have you ever found something that you were researching and thought, oh, this is right, and then years later find out, oh, that's completely wrong? So. Yeah,
there are definitely times. And the tricky thing is that sources of history don't even agree on a lot of stuff. So what I find in my text may disagree with someone else's text. So you have to choose your sources as well. And, you know, you find that just so often. One of my best friends wrote something that takes place in one of the Japanese internment camps in World War II here. And she's like, well, based on this source, but then there's this source, and they contradict each other completely. And it's like, so you just have to pick. So, you know, we all pick our history. And, you know, as a fiction writer, I pick the history that's most convenient to my story.
Okay, that sounds fair to me. I'll go with that. Let's see. Oh, somebody wants to know, what's your biggest source of inspiration?
Oh, my biggest source of inspiration. Gosh, it's probably my own family. Because, you know, they provide me with all of my daily communication. And yeah, my daughter's this immensely talented artist, and my son has this creativity that's just crazy and all digital. And my husband, of course, works his way into all my heroes. So, you know, they're probably the biggest thing. And just, I think just the vastness of the world around us, and how different people are, and how each one of us is who God made us to be. And I just love seeing how he talks to us all differently, and he reaches us all, and he leads us all on our separate paths and our separate journeys. But it requires community to be the church. So I just love how that always plays out, and how it plays out in history. So that's always going to work its way into my books too. So I try to just pick, you know, the unique and the unexplored, and kind of go from there and see what we can do and what stories come.
Awesome. That's a great question. I love that one. So, and then somebody is curious about book 2 and 3, which are still set on the Isles. So
yes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to them.
Yeah, the whole series is set during the summer and into the autumn of 1906. So,
Okay.
So book 2, we have Libby and Oliver, and book 1. Yeah, book 2 is about Oliver's sister, Beth, the other Elizabeth, and Lord Sheridan. And book 3 will be Lady Emily and Libby's brother, Telford, who is Bran. So, yeah, lots of fun.
Good. So, you have some pictures of the Isles.
I do, yeah.
Share with us, which I think is a good thing to do when you're talking about book 2 and 3, that maybe even with book 1, you can say, you know, this is what I based that on. So,
yep. All right, so
all
these are
travel.
yeah, so these are all just stock photos. I was not there to take them, obviously, so they're not necessarily specific to my story, but they're the closest I could get on Shutterstock. So here we go. Let me grab my screen here. There we are. And share. Okay, so this is our beautiful heather that you will see. Interestingly, to Libby anyway, I don't know if anyone else cares, but even the heather on the islands is slightly different from the heather in the rest of England.
Is it thicker, or what is the difference?
It's a different variety. So I guess the flower would be slightly different and all that. I am not a naturalist, so all I knew was like, oh, look, different, huh?
And so, I thought heather was heather, so
apparently not. There are a lot of varieties. Who knows? See, we're learning stuff tonight. Yeah. So here's a map that I actually made of the Isles of Scilly for in the front of the books in the series. So it is 28 miles off the coast of Cornwall, but it is part of the Cornwall region, which is part of the Duchy of Cornwall. So the Duke of Cornwall is actually the Prince of Wales. So whoever is the Prince of Wales also owns the Isles of Scilly. No one else owns property in the islands. It all belongs to him. So the main inhabited islands are St. Mary's, St. Agnes, Tresco, Briar, and St. Martin's. There are a lot of other islands, but they're not really inhabited. Some of them were throughout history, but at this point, not so much. They're awfully small. It's believed that they all used to be one large island, and then when the sea levels rose, it obliterated all the lower places. So these are actually the tops. These are the mountaintops of the island that used to be. So this is what we have remaining. Let's see what's next. So to get to the islands, if you want to go visit these days, you have a couple choices. You can helicopter in, or you can take the ferry. The ferry was, of course, how people have traditionally arrived before helicopters and airplanes. So it's about a 2-hour ride, or at least it was at the time. I don't know how long this current one takes, from Penzance, which is on the coast of Cornwall, to the Isles of Scilly. So interestingly, I have been to England once, and we went to Cornwall. This was when I was writing A Name Unknown, so it's set in Cornwall. So I thought, hey, I didn't know it, but I walked right by where you get on the ferry to the Isles of Scilly. No clue what they were at the time. Didn't know where those boats were going, but I've been to the Penzance side of the ferry.
There you go.
Yep. So here are some pictures from St. Mary's, which is where Libby is staying in the book. So it's the largest island. This is one of the burial mounds from the Druid days. These are scattered all throughout the islands. The Bronze Age history there is just huge. So these islands have been inhabited for millennia, just time after time. So this is the Quay at St. Mary's. You can see all the boats. That's how the islanders get around. To get from island to island takes 20 or 30 minutes. So this is their highway. They just jump in their little boats and they putter from island to island. So that was kind of fun to put yourself into that. You know, you don't use cars or even really horses much there. You use boats for everything. So just some pretty pictures because it's all so lovely. And this would be the seawall on St. Mary's. So Libby's cottage would have been somewhere nearby here. And you can see all the rock formations. The islands are made of granite. So many of the cottages are also made of granite. And you can also, in this picture, see some of the flora. In the corner up there is a Cornish palm. So when I was in Cornwall, I was looking at these palm trees going, palm trees in England? What in the world is this? So they're called a Cornish palm, but they're actually a cabbage tree. So they're not related to a tropical palm at all, but they look like it. So they really make the place look tropical. So here's just a view of one of the towns in St. Mary's. There are a couple main towns. Hughtown is the biggest one. That's where Libby is staying. So then there are the small islands of St. Agnes and Quay, which don't really come up much in book 1, but they do come up in book 2. So keep your eye out for St. Agnes and Quay. So these two are actually 2 islands that are combined by this little strip of sand called a tombolo. So in high tide, you can't get across from one side to the other, but during low tide, you can actually walk from one to the other. So you'll see up in this picture here in the right-hand corner, there's a standing stone. It's called the Old Man, and it's very near another burial chamber that was excavated in the late 1800s, 1890s, I believe. So there's, again, lots of history there and more beautiful scenery, lovely beaches everywhere you go. Annette is actually an uninhabited island that has a lot of birds. So Libby would have loved to go and just kind of walk around and see all the nests of all these birds. But there's not much else to see there because it's teensy tiny. So Sampson is one of the other larger islands. It used to be inhabited up until the 1850s, I believe, 1860s. But at that point, they had a lot of their men who were killed trying to rescue people from a shipwreck. And their farms were just failing. It was not very fertile. So the Lord Proprietor actually said, we're done. You're all coming over to another island. That's enough. You're going to die if you stay over there. So he tried to make a deer park on the island, but even the deer didn't want to stay there. So during low tide, they waded over to another island and tried to make their escape. So Sampson, it now has ruins of houses. So we have a couple views of it from the other islands. And as you can see, a lot of the smaller islands are kind of bare and almost bald, like they don't have big trees or anything, but still just lovely. I'd love to go explore these little paths here. So then we have Tresco, which is the other main inhabited island, and this is where Oliver lives. So Tresco's main town is Grimsby. So there's the old side and the new side. The new side is also old at this point. It's a really pretty little town, and this is also where the Lord Proprietor lives. So the Duke of Cornwall, I can speak, really I can, owns the islands, but he isn't there, so he's not in charge of them. So he puts someone else in charge of them, and this is the Lord Proprietor. So it has been in this family. It is now the Dorian Smiths. It was the Dorians for a while, and the Smiths, and they, so they live in this beautiful Abbey Manor house. So this is the Tresco Abbey, and it is the only manor house in the Isles of Scilly. So I wanted my hero to have, a nice house too, because he is a gentleman. So I had to totally fabricate something. There is no other house nearly as grand, and his isn't nearly as grand as the Abbey, but a little more grand than your average cottage. So these are the famous Abbey Gardens. There are a couple pictures I'll show you of these. So the gardens are, of course, attached to the Abbey, but in the 1800s, they brought seeds and plants from every nation in the empire, the British Empire. And because the Scillies are so much warmer than the rest of England, they're actually subtropical, these plants all flourish here. So they've got different regions of the garden that are set up to be different regions of the world. So we have Australia and New Zealand and South America and all these really cool things. So there are plants in Tresco specifically that are nowhere else in England, that can't grow anywhere else in England, and so many varieties of them. And of course, just through the miracles of wind and birds, a lot of these plants now grow other places in the islands as well, because the seeds have been dispersed. But so it's just this wonderful, beautiful pathways, flowers. And actually January 1st of every year, they do a counting of the blooms, where they go out, the gardener with his assistants, and they count how many flowers are in bloom on the 1st of January. Now, I don't know about where you live, but here the answer is 0, right? But there the answer are hundreds. So this is how early spring comes in the Scillies. And the flower trade actually is what has made them thrive, the flower trade and tourism, in the last couple hundred years. So they have daffodil fields and all these beautiful plant nurseries where they grow flowers and then import them to Europe. So this is what has made the islands able to survive. We also have some old castles and ruins that are just so much fun. So they work their way into the story. Not going to tell you how. And just more ruins. I love the pictures of all the old stuff. It's so fun. So we do have Tian, which is another small island that is currently uninhabited but has some ruins. So there is a scene in the book on Tian. And there we go. That was our Isles of Scilly.
I believe you should take us on a guided tour to Scilly, like next week.
I totally agree. I mean, I've never been there, so it would totally be making it up as I go. But yes, y'all just send me your money and I'll set it up. Make sure there's enough to cover my passage too, and we'll go. It'll be great.
And make sure you spell my name correctly.
Right. That's Roseanna.
Oh, but you have made me want to go. That is beautiful. And I have to admit, you had said that before we get started here, that there were palm trees, and I'm like, in England? Now, I've only been to England once too, and it was cold and yucky some of the time. It was cold the whole time, and the other time it was wet and yucky. So it was like, palm trees?
Yeah.
Now, I've been to the tropics. That's not England.
No. Yeah, we went to Cornwall in September of 2016. And, we were there, and it was, 60s most days, and it rained every day, but not all day, just some. And everywhere we went, and we're talking to people, they're like, oh, you got lovely weather. And we're like, sure, thanks. Yeah, lovely weather, as I pull my jacket closer. So, I was baffled by palm trees in Cornwall.
And then you said they count the blooms in January. Now, we were there in May, which in Michigan, May can be very nice. It never got above 65. It was very windy, and then it started raining and then didn't stop. And it was like, we too. We were out about and say, oh, at least you got nice weather. No, this is cold.
Different definitions.
Yeah, so that's fascinating that it's like almost tropical there.
It's so much warmer. It's actually warmer there than the Mediterranean throughout a lot of the year. So
might have to rethink where I'm retiring too.
I know, right? And it's also temperate. It doesn't get hot. So it's like, high of 75, low of 65 most of the year. So
I will let people go to Hawaii. I'm going to well, I'll just tell them to go to England. I want to go there.
I'll come visit.
Yeah. Every day. So I got to ask, and thank you for sharing those pictures.
Sure.
Awesome. So I got to ask, have you in your research ever found something that like just really threw you? Like, oh, really? That happened or whatever? And then did you include it in the book? Or did you like, well, that's too weird. I can't do that.
Most of the time, I will include all the fun facts that I find if I can. Sometimes they just don't fit in. And sometimes I find the ones that I'm like, man, why didn't I know this 3 books ago? So a funny example is Cockney rhyming slang. So if you read, An Hour Unspent, I'm like, 3rd book, Barclay, in Shadows Over England. I hit on this a bit. But so Cockney rhyming slang is this language that is developed that's all about words that sound like other words, and a community knows what they mean. So if you ask, where's, Sue? Someone might go, oh, up the apples. And you're going, what? And it's stairs, because stairs rhymes with pears, and pears are like apples. So you pick a rhyming word and then a word associated with it that doesn't rhyme, and that's what you say. And so it's like, so when I learned about that, and that this is centuries old, and I'm going, this is so cool. Why didn't I know this all along? So I just had to sneak it just a little bit into book 3, because it would have been really weird to like suddenly have it in book 3 when it hadn't been in books 1 and 2. But yeah, great fun.
That is interesting. I had heard about that. I was trying to think, and I think is it Mary Poppins 2 that has that?
Yeah, it does have a little. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then I was right. That's what I thought you were talking about. So that is fascinating.
Yeah.
And how fun. I'm glad you included it, because it was fun.
It was fun.
One of those a little bit different things. So,
yes.
But yeah, so while you were doing our travel log, somebody wanted to know if you have traveled to any of the locations of your books.
some of them, not as many as I would like, and especially not as many as my husband would like, because I'm a homebody and he's got the wanderlust. So I've been to, obviously, I've already said I've been to Cornwall and London and the Cotswolds all in that one trip. So that hit where some of the ladies of the manor was set. Actually, book 3, A Lady Unrivaled, released while I was in the Cotswolds, and it was set in the Cotswolds. So I'm like posing the book and taking pictures going, look, Ella's taking her walk through the woods. And it was great fun. So I've been to those places, and, you know, some of my American set ones I've been to, you know, I've been to Baltimore, go figure, right? And I've been to Annapolis. I actually went to school there. So I had a book set there, and that was cool. I have my next book after this series completes. I'm doing a standalone set, partly in London during the Codebreaker days and partly in Ocracoke, North Carolina in the Outer Banks. So I just went to Ocracoke in May and have like literally hundreds of pictures. So that was fun. It's not often I get to do that hands-on research, but it's really great when I can do that hands-on research.
So where would you set a book if anywhere in the world? You not necessarily need to travel, but if you had to pick a place, oh, I really want to write a book about, where?
Oh, I want to write books about everywhere because it's all so fun. I still want to write something about Ireland. I haven't gone to Ireland yet, so I have an idea for an Ireland set trilogy. You know, I'd like to go back to Scotland. I really do enjoy England. My family is English by, you know, heritage, not recent history, but more recent than I thought. It was actually my like great grandfather who came over on my dad's side. So, you know, I have that interest. I would like to set something sometime in Italy, but that is partly because I want to go there and I want to have an excuse. So
I'll go with you.
Right? Yeah. So when we discovered that if I travel in order to research, we then get to write it off the taxes, my husband's like, okay, so here's the list of the places you need to set a book. So not that we've done this, there's still, you know, money required. But yeah, so that would be fun. Yeah. I'll accept donations. Send me to the place you want a book set. So, and then the Outer Banks are actually a place I've been wanting to set a book for a long time. I've had a story idea for that for like 20 years now. So that's exciting that I get to do that coming up. And yeah, I'm sure there are more because seriously, every time I learn about a place, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I should set something there. I am never short of ideas.
Great. Now, and you said this was a standalone, and I'm sorry, you've written 25 of them, so I've lost track. Have you written standalones? I'm very familiar with your series, so I was trying to think of standalones, and have you written a standalone before?
I've only had a couple. My first one was Love Finds You in Annapolis, Maryland, which after the Love Finds You line went out, I redid it as A Heart's Revolution. And then Dreams of Savannah, which just came out in January.
Oh, I knew that one.
And and then there will be this one, which right now I'm calling it Yesterday's Tides. I don't know if that's the name that will stick through the process, but we'll see. So my current thing, and we'll see how long Bethany House plays ball with me on this, is write a series, do a standalone, write a series, do a standalone. So I like it. We'll see how it goes.
We're okay with it. I mean, I know other authors that write a lot of series do that just to kind of separate everything.
Yeah, separate the worlds a little and give you it's a break, and because you have to stay in the same world for those 3 books or however long the series is. So it's kind of fun to then go, okay, now way off here, let's do something different.
So this is always a question I want to ask series. So it's the first time I've asked somebody that writes series is, have you ever gotten to book 3, started writing about one of the characters in book 1 and then went, uh-oh, I don't remember like what he looks like or something. Have you ever had that happen?
You're kidding, right? Of course I have that happen. Okay. There have been moments where I'm like, and wait, name, what was her mom's name? And so yeah, like back in my 20s when my brain was really, really fresh, this didn't happen so often. These days, I literally keep a document that has notes like, Bram always has an extra handkerchief, and Emily's afraid of dark places, and things I need to remember for the rest of the series. So yes, it happens. Okay. The awesome editorial team actually keeps a Bible for each series where they keep track of facts for you, for your fictional characters. So they make sure you don't have the wrong eye color, hair color, And they do. They double check with me on this stuff all the time. But because my series have been kind of interwoven and, you know, they were all the same story world, they actually specifically said, stop, no more. You have to start fresh. Our list is too long. We can't keep up with it. So I'm like, oh, okay, we'll say goodbye to Barkley and the rest of the team. And that's why we came back to 1906 for this one. Totally fresh world. It's still the same world in my mind, but you won't see overlapping characters.
Which I have to admit, I do enjoy that, you know, you get to visit with old friends like that, but I can see where that gets a little confusing for especially editorial teams. Yeah, like it's not bad for readers because if they don't know the character already, then they just don't know that they should have, and it's fine. They're really just cameos. But if you do, then you're like, hey, look, it's Brooke. Brooke's here. So, you know. Oh, look, she's doing great.
Yes, we just need to check in every now and then and make sure the old friends are doing okay.
Yep, I'm okay with that. So talk to the editorials. And...
That's right.
Here, let's see. We got a couple other ones. This one is about which book out of the 3 in this series. So I assume they meant this series, not the past series. Did you enjoy writing and connect with the most?
Well, I haven't finished book 3 yet, so
it's not really a fair question. You're not.
that one is still in the phase of is good. I don't know. We'll see. So thus far, it's been book 1 and book 2. It's a funny question because like I am more like the characters in book 1. I am quiet. I am a homebody. I'm not nearly as observant as Libby is when it comes to the things around me and nature, but just in terms of personality. But then in book 2, they're both like adventurous and they want to explore the world. And this is not me at all, but it is my husband. So he's reading it and he's going, how can you write about someone with wanderlust when you never want to leave the house? I'm like, I don't know, but did I do okay? He's like, yeah, you got it. He's like, now can you just get it? Like catch it, catch the wanderlust. Like, try.
It's like morning and night people marry each other. So let's say home and wanderlust people marry each other too.
Yeah, but I have to say, book 2, if you've read book 1, you meet Sheridan toward the end and he's funny. So book 2 is in Sheridan's head half the time. So it's really funny. Like it's just funny. So we said we weren't going to talk about humor, but have to because Sheridan's just funny. So
he is. I have to admit he was probably one of my favorite characters, but I, like Libby, wanted to clunk him a couple times.
That's why he's funny, right? Like,
right, exactly.
Totally oblivious. He's so focused.
And you're trying to listen to him, and it's like, just get to the point. Oh, wait.
Yep.
Yeah, I enjoyed him thoroughly.
Oh, good.
So I'm looking forward to book 2, and I might have to throw it against the wall a couple times. But that'd be fun. So this one is a little more generic. It's not going to be so much on focusing on the historical part of it. But somebody asked, do you have tips for a writer who's trying to delve into characters? Any specific things you do to go deep with them? So they seem to be talking and asking about character development.
Sure. I have an entire class on this that you can find on my website, interestingly enough. It's called Soul Deep Characters. So this is something I think about a lot because I don't tend to think about story development and character development in the traditional ways. Like I don't read craft books on writing. I can't label my own stuff. So I tend to think about it in a very different way. So it's similar, but just slightly off, right, from what people normally do. So things I tend to focus on, instead of just viewing it as character arc or character development, or, how do we get them from point A to point B, I kind of invert it just a little bit. And instead I think, what needs to happen to make them into the person they need to be by the end of the book? So I look at it as the spiritual journey they're on and the faith journey they're on and who they need to be by the end. And they're never there yet at the beginning, right? Because anytime we're on a journey, we're not at the end at the beginning. So what is going to make us grow? And that's kind of where plot comes from for me is, for instance, in The Number of Love, she loses someone very dear to her. And that happens solely because I started the book thinking, how do I shake Margot's world? She's not very shakeable. So there was only one thing I could think of, and that's what had to happen. Because you know, I had to get her to open up, and to get her to open up, I had to crack her. So yeah, so that's how I think of characters. And then what I found to be really interesting is a lot of people will do like the personality quizzes for their characters. I instead like to do a spiritual gift quiz sort of thing for my characters. So I made a list of all the gifts listed in the Bible, and kind of figure out which characters fulfill which ones if I want my community to work well, and which ones must be missing or used badly if there's a broken spot. So, you know, who has the gift of administration and is keeping things in order, and who has the gift of teaching and is always the one providing the instruction, and, you know, is the wise counselor sort of thing. So I found that to be a really fun way to go about it, a little different from what people normally do.
No, but you know what? Now some of your characters, their development makes sense. It really does, because I can remember when I first started The Nature of the Lady, Oliver, and and he would do things, and I'd go, and he's a pastor? So, you know,
getting in fist fights, right?
Yeah, you know, and you know, being, you know, all cocky and not like, okay, I'm not gonna give spoilers away, but not liking certain people. How's that?
Yeah.
You know, I found that fascinating, but that makes sense if that's, you know, how you get from, well, A to B for, you know, beginning to end. So, and on that thought, are you more of a plotter or a pantser then?
I like to think I'm a hybrid. I mean, I have to turn in a synopsis to Bethany House before I start writing a book to be approved. So I have the general idea, but my synopses are filled with things like, and then after a big reveal, we won't say what it is because I don't know, you know, transformation occurs. And so at this point, they've worked with me enough that they're like, okay, Roseanna, here's the deal. Just make it hit these points. Like, okay. But what I found is that I write a lot faster if I have things planned out. So I usually give myself a few chapters to really get into it and get to know the characters and just explore and discover. And then I'll start writing out just like a little outline for each chapter, like what I want to happen, which may or may not go according to plan. You know, I don't stick to things really closely, but I have been writing in large chunks lately. So I'll take a week and sit down and write and do nothing else and get through nearly half a book that way. So I have to have it plotted out in order to do that. Otherwise, I sit there like this for a really long time. That's not very productive. So I'll just be going, and what happens? Ran out of story. Anyway, story. So
We showed a line. Awesome. Oh, that's interesting though, that, you know, you have, and I love that question. One of the listeners asked it one of the first times, and I thought that's such a, because everybody's so different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every once in a while somebody will go, oh, I am definitely this, but most people will, you know, a little bit of everything.
Right. And I used to be a total pantser. Like I would not write anything down at all, or I'd get through the first 75% of the book, and then I had it all figured out. So I would just jot it down so I wouldn't forget, but it wasn't like ahead of time really. But yeah, the more contracts I've gotten with like deadlines and stuff, I kind of had to like deliver on time. So I had to be a little more organized.
Boy, those Bethany people are tough.
I know. They like expect books by the time they say. I don't know.
Yeah, and then people come in and go, well, why hasn't she written another one? So I don't know. People are very patient. So one of the questions I always like to ask when you have an author like you, who obviously loves the genre they write. So, okay, not taking that away from you, but if you could write a different genre book, what would you write?
It would probably always be romance, because what's a book without a little romance? So probably contemporary romance, maybe with some suspense thrown in. I actually have written those. They're just not published. But mostly, I mean, historical was my first love. I wrote my first book at age 13. It was brilliant.
Sure.
So actually it turned into The Lost Heiress eventually.
Really?
It took 20 years and 10,000 rewrites, but the kernel of the story is the same. It's still Brooke and Justin. So I totally forget now where I was going with that. But historicals have always been my first love. So at the time when I wrote it, it was set in Victorian England. But, you know, we changed that up a little through the ages. But so I thought it would be easier to be published in contemporary because at the time when I was trying, that's what was selling. So I wrote a bunch of contemporary stories, and then it was a historical that got picked up. So I was like, okay, we'll go with historical. Yay! So.
You know, you do what works. And, you know, and I think sometimes you can tell with an author, you know, whatever they give you, you go, oh, well, this, I mean, they're both good, but this is where your heart is.
Right.
You know, and listening to you talk about research on historical and stuff, you know, you should write historical. I mean,
I should totally write historical. That is where my heart is. So the contemporaries are kind of like, they're fun, they're breaks. I can have cell phones and internet, and that's great. And so I've done a few for guideposts that are like contemporary mysteries with a historical line in them. And that was fun that I got to be like, woohoo, I can pick any name I want. It doesn't have to be accurate to a time and place. Yay. But historical is where my heart is.
Definitely shows. So there was something I was going to ask you and now it ran away, but yeah, so let me find something else. Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. Sorry. Is what are some of the books you are reading now, whether they're historical or not, doesn't really matter, but are reading and or looking forward to reading, you know, in the next few months?
Okay, I have a list. Because I knew this question was coming. And so this is a snapshot of my reading list, right? So this is the ones I just finished or will be reading in the next month or two for my book club that meets at my church. So I have just finished reading one of Jody Headland's, her time travel one. Come back to me. Yeah. So just finished that last week. It was really good. I just finished reading Jamie Jo Wright's On the Cliffs of Foxglove Manor. That was really good. So that's my book club's next read. And then after that one, we plan these out months in advance. And so this is really, my book club is just my want to read list because they always say, you pick them, Roseanna. So I'm like, okay. So we have Siri Mitchell's Suspense coming up. I forget the title of her new one, but that's coming up. And Terry Blackstock's new one is on our list soon. I just got Connie Lynn Cossette's new one, her biblical, and that one is definitely sneaking its way in because we were all like at the end of the previous one of the duology. It's like, what's happening to the brother? So very excited for that. I have Christy Cambron's Castle series sitting here. I read the first one when it was relatively new and then didn't even realize there were more in the series for a while till my sister was like, you have to read these. So they're on my list for this summer. I'm embarrassed to say I just read my first Becky Wade last month. And I don't know how I missed it this long because I knew she was awesome. And I've seen her books everywhere. I just hadn't picked one up yet, though I have them on my shelf. So I finally read one and then went, of course, this is why everyone loves her. She's amazing. So yeah.
You're in for a treat there. She's got lots of good ones.
Oh, I know. And similarly, Karen Whittemeyer, I'm way behind on hers too, but I have some of hers sitting on my shelf as well. And of course, Jocelyn Green, who is like the sweetest person in the history of the world. Yeah. So hers are also on my list for the summer. So that's
you're gonna be busy.
The snapshot. Summer, I'm a homeschool mom, so summers are my free time, not like every other mom in the world that has kids in school that then the kids are home, they can't get anything done. So summer is when I get to read because I'm not reading to my kids all the time. So yep, looking forward to it all. Yay.
Yeah, you know what? And you have got a fabulous list there. I've read some of them. I've got other ones on my list. And I have to agree with the Karen Whitmeyer thing. She always makes me laugh out loud.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, that's great.
But, oh, excuse me. I can do this. I've done this before. So, do you have a release date on book? I know book 2 is due out early in 2022, but the third one, do you have a release date yet?
It should be September of 2022.
Oh, okay.
It's I only know this because it's a year after I turn it in, and I'm turning it in the first week of September. So
so we need to get on that schedule and know that. Okay, we'll write that down.
Yeah. So my releases, my series with Bethany House tend to be June-ish, and then January and September. So
good to know. So on that lines then, how long does it usually take you to write a book?
Well, I usually have about 6 months between deadlines. Sometimes it's a little more for the stretch between series and stuff. but then if I'm sneaking an extra book in, you know, so usually around 6 months between books, but I'm not writing actively that whole time because I have 10,000 other jobs that I'm responsible for. So usually 2 to 3 months of active writing time for me.
And then I had mentioned earlier that you had written 25 books, and I was going to let you tell people how long you've been writing, because to me it sounds like then she's been writing for years and years and years, but it hasn't been.
Yeah, those are, I have been writing for years and years, but publishing not quite as long. My first book came out in 2009. So that was A Stray Drop of Blood that was put out with Whitefire Publishing that my husband and I own. So small press, we experimented on me. So yeah, so that's all in the last, 12, 13 years.
That is amazing. I still am totally in awe in that. That's why I wanted to make sure we talked about it, because that is amazing. Oh, this is kind of a fun little question. Do you incorporate things you learned from your books in homeschooling into your books?
Oh, yes. I'm just laughing because I have like half of my books are just homeschool books where I was like, oh, this, yeah, we're going to put that in there. I have pages photocopied from books I knew I was going to lend to someone. I was like, well, you can have it, but not until I copy the pages about World War I aviators. Sorry. So yeah, absolutely. I learn a lot through homeschooling. And the curriculum we used was called Sunlight, which is literature based. So we read a lot of books, and the main part of the learning is the parent reading aloud to the child. So for the last 11 years, I have been spending an hour or two of my day reading to the kids, which is great and wonderful fun. But yes, I've learned so much through homeschool that totally works its way into my books. But then, of course, I research far further, and I'm looking for a little more detail than we tell the 8-year-olds. So then when it comes around again, I'm like, and actually, let me add. And the kids are like, oh, gosh, just read the book, Mom. But they didn't tell you the whole story. So.
Have they ever asked you or told you you should put this in a book?
Probably. I don't know. My whole family revolves around literature so much that it's funny. Like they will frequently come out and say, did you know? You can use that sometime. And more like on my blog every Monday, I do a word of the week where I look at etymology of a word and how it's changed over time. So just all throughout our week, someone will go, why do we use this like this? Is this word related to that word? Word of the week. And so I literally will jump up and write it down. So, yep, this is our family. It's great.
Hey, it's great. And you know what? If you can use it more than one way, I'm never against that. So, well, thank you. Thank you so much for everything tonight. It was so much fun getting to know you, learning about research and all the fun things that you've done for your books, which make them just all the better.
Thank you.
And while I'm thinking of it, what is the address for your website? Because you do sell your books and such there. And if Whitefire's got an address?
Oh, absolutely. Whitefire is whitefire-publishing.com. And mine is roseannamwhite.com. And yeah, there you can find all my stuff. I have all my books that I sell signed copies of. I also have some that are special edition, which I'm going to reach over here and show you because I just started doing this. Super cool. So I started painting edges of my books. So you can also find these on my website. There's just, one of each. They come with a certificate of authenticity and everything. So that's my latest project because I don't know, I was bored, I guess. I don't know.
Sure, because you were doing nothing else.
I have nothing else to do. So a name unknown had to have bookshelves.
Right, those are gorgeous.
Yep. So that was my fun over the last few months.
For a little while. That's awesome. So.
Yep. And I also have I have tea parties about once a month, which are an online thing like this through Zoom. But I send you a tea party package in the mail, so you get your little cake bites and tea and all that fun stuff. So we do those about once a month and talk about a book. It's a tea party book club. So you can get that on there. Great fun. We've been doing it for like 2.5 years now. So
what a great idea. I love that.
Yep. And if you're a writer, I have classes on my website too. So all sorts of stuff over there. It's a happening place.
Yeah. Why are we sitting here? Oh, wait.
Because you're talking to us. So that's great fun.
That's right. Okay. We'll stay there. So we'll go look for that later. But truly, thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being just willing to share all this fun stuff. I always say this, but I feel like we could go on for hours. Really, we could. I mean, talking books is never long enough. So
yep. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
That sounds good. We have a standing invite to come into the store too. We would love to host you here. So
I would love to come.
Yeah. So, and thank you everybody for attending. We really appreciate that. Supporting us here at Baker. We can't tell you thank you enough. We really can't. But you can find Roseanna's books at bakerbookhouse.com. And I know with the Baker books, most of them, the Bethany Baker books are free shipping. So if you haven't got them all, make sure you pick them up soon. So thank you everybody for attending, and we will see you again soon. Bye now.